When Ineos and Jim Ratcliffe took over Manchester United, I wasn't that optimistic because a minority takeover that still leaves the Glazers in charge, benefiting financially from Manchester United despite what they've done for 20 years, that didn't sit well with me. And of course, at the end of the season, I always look forward to the Athletics in-depth dossier, and Laurie Whitwell and the Athletic did not disappoint because he gave us a insider perspective to ins and outs of Manchester United this season and how Ineos are essentially running Manchester United like it's a circus. Let me know your thoughts down below. I've linked the article down below as well, so you guys can go ahead and read it. We're gonna go through it. So as always, guys, be sure to hit the like button, be sure to subscribe if you are new here. Let's go. Now let's start with the main part. Of course, Ineos have been at Manchester United for just under 18 months. Sir Jim Ratcliffe and Manchester United have given the Glazers a lifeline, and what I mean by that is that the minority takeover that Ineos and Jim Ratcliffe undertook gave the Glazers a seat financially at Manchester United without having to do nothing. I mean, it's not the fact that, they've been here for 20 years and run the club into turmoil and they've run the club as a commercial business. But for me, I don't even feel like it's any different to maybe what Jim Ratcliffe is doing. Now, as I said, The Athletic did an in-depth piece, and I'm going to start with possibly the part that kind of confirms to me that Jim Ratcliffe's Manchester United project is a vanity project. It's an ego project. It's something to stroke his ego, make him feel better about being a businessman. Because Manchester United's focus is pre-season revenue right now. They've already jetted off to Far East Asia to make some money. They're going to take part in a pre-season tour in America to make money. Reportedly, according to The Athletic, players' concerns was that this was agreed in January. Manchester United, Ineos, and the owners and those involved in the boardroom argue that due to Manchester United's revenue slump because of how the season has turned out to be, they have to find other avenues of making revenue elsewhere. Now, just some insight into Manchester United's pre-season tour. They are heading off to Malaysia and Far East Asia to undertake in some games, but also some individual players are expected to jet off to nearer countries to do some commercial stuff. Players have been selected, senior players have been selected, and then they report for pre-season to head off to America. This was decided in January of 2025. Way before Manchester United maybe knew guaranteed that they were finishing 15th, 16th, 17th. Players were not happy with this, and I really don't blame them because they are being used as cash cows. Yes, they get paid a lot of money, but Manchester United recovery for footballers, it sounds like it's neglected, given the fact that some of the article goes in depth about the injury problems that Manchester United have. Now, when Jim Ratcliffe reportedly arrived at Manchester United, he liked to make himself known at Carrington to staff. Taking into consideration that Manchester United have made over 600 people redundant, reportedly Jim Ratcliffe has been to Carrington multiple times, and in one instance even met with backroom staff such as physios, masseurs, and chefs, asking them what they do, and also providing his email and asking for details to be emailed over to him about what they do on a day-to-day basis. He even went as far to give stretching advice based on his experience of running multiple marathons at his age to the backroom staff. Now, again, for me, that's just comical. That's just comical. As a owner, I think I'm in two parts about it, because you have owners that have never been involved with the club. They've never really shown up when it mattered. And then you have a minority owner who seems to, it feels like, undermine a lot of employees, especially given the fact with all the redundancies that have been happening. Jim Ratcliffe is not a favourite at Manchester United, not with, the everyday working staff, the working class people of Manchester United. He is not a favourite with them. Now, if we actually go on to talk about his involvement, yes, guys, his involvement with the sacking of Dan Ashworth and the appointment of Ruben Amorim, this is where it really gets interesting, because not just Dan Ashworth, but even Wilcox had his reservations of appointing a manager mid-season, or not even mid-season, but in November, who plays a back three without the fundamentals of the players that are required to do so. The reason why Dan Ashworth was sacked was because he did not give Jim Ratcliffe a clear directive way to approach this, i.e. he didn't give a clear, this is the manager you should appoint. Omar Barada was reportedly heavily involved in the appointment of Ruben Amorim, and it seems like it's a clash of hot-headed, emotionally invested people with big egos making decisions, essentially. Jim Ratcliffe, Omar Barada, Dan Ashworth and Jason Wilcox sound like they are on the same page, or they were on the same page, and essentially any suggestion made by Wilcox and by Dan Ashworth was overridden by Omar Barada, who I think, if anything goes wrong with Ruben Amorim, if they end up sacking him mid-season next season, if it does not work out and Man United end up having a horrendous season next season, there's going to be a lot of criticism landing at the door of Omar Barada, the CEO of Manchester United. Now, Jim Ratcliffe obviously spent a lot of money to take over Manchester United. It is reported. Now, this is the interesting part to me. This is the very interesting part to me. And this is why I also say that there's a bit of ego flying around, because it wasn't just other people at Manchester United that don't see eye to eye with Jim Ratcliffe and maybe his involvement at Manchester United, but reportedly Manchester United's pre-season tour last year, when Erik ten Hag was still the manager, it was starting off against Rosenborg the day before the Euros final. Jim Ratcliffe invited all of the travelling players plus the staff to watch the game on his yacht. Yes, on his luxurious yacht. And as a result, Erik ten Hag and players voiced their concern about it being a potential party. And as it's the day before their first preseason game, Erik ten Hag requested that they do not go and stay there for longer than 90 minutes. There wasn't many senior players there. It's mentioned Casemiro, Marcus Rashford, Mason Mount, etc., and a lot of academy players. Because of what Erik ten Hag suggested about players only being there for 90 minutes, yes, for 90 minutes, Jim Ratcliffe took the invitation back. Yes, he took the invitation back. Just because the manager at the time raised the concern of it potentially looking like and feeling like it could be a party, and wanting his players to be in full spirits, full energy for their first pre-season game of the tour. Now, aside from obviously all of that stuff, I think the article also commends Bruno Fernandes and his leadership. It also confirms that Al Hilal have offered £80 million for Bruno Fernandes, and nearly triple of his salary. It's not maybe as much as what Cristiano Ronaldo earns, but it's still a lot of money. Now, if you guys actually think about it, the Saudi Pro League and the 4 clubs in the Saudi Pro League who are owned by the Sovereign Wealth Fund in Saudi Arabia, they relatively do not spend big transfer fees on players. I think the biggest that they've spent is on Neymar and John Duran, and that don't even hit the 100 million euro mark. So Bruno Fernandes, if he does go to Saudi, will be the most expensive player. Now, shout out to Bruno Fernandes, because of him, Joshua Zirkzee was able to lift his head up after that catastrophic performance against Newcastle at Old Trafford at the end of 2024, where he was booed off. Reportedly, Bruno Fernandes was in the crowd. Yes, I remember, because he was serving a disciplinary for getting sent off the game before that. And Bruno Fernandes, when he saw what happened and he saw Joshua Zirkzee darting down the touchline and into the tunnel, he left the director's box during the game, went down to the dressing room and gave some words of encouragement to him to be able to get him to go back and sit on the bench. And I think that just shows you the kind of player that he is. Now, according to Laurie Whitwell and The Athletic, Manchester United are prioritizing particular things in player recruitment. And this is being led by Jason Wilcox. It's being led by Jason Wilcox and Christopher Vivell. Of course, that is what they're brought in to do, especially Christopher Vivell. The reason why is because they do not want to place emphasis on this idea of playing with a back three forever. And there was some concerns about appointing Ruben Amorim to play this back three, because that wasn't seen as the Manchester United way. Despite that, the reports are that the Manchester United recruitment strategy going forward is to sign players that can flourish in multiple different systems. And the way to do that is by signing players that have abilities and characteristics that tick the box of just generally a good footballing system. That means athleticism, that means technical ability, the ability to score goals, it means strength, it means pace, it means all these different attributes that players should have is the kind of players that Manchester United will be targeting. Now, Jim Ratcliffe talks a lot about the idea that Manchester United are financially inept, Manchester United are struggling financially, but it sounds like he has the ability to throw around money to many different people. Now, one of them is a 78-year-old sprint coach. Yes, a 78-year-old sprint coach that his involvement cost Manchester United 80,000 plus accommodation, etc., etc. Now, it doesn't sound like a lot of money in the grand scheme of things when Man United make millions, but it is a lot of money when people are being made redundant, when foundations are getting money cut, club ambassadors are getting money cut. But Sir Jim Ratcliffe is happy to appoint people that he knows, data specialists, from Mercedes F1 that he knows, a sprint coach that he knows, that he feels like, oh, they can they can offer some insight and some advice that can take Manchester United one step forward and give the idea of marginal gains. We heard that term so much last season from Dave Brailsford and Jim Ratcliffe, the idea of marginal gains. Now, this sprint coach was brought in to work with none other than Mason Mount, because he identified a weird running mechanism that Mason Mount had that was restricting him from sprinting properly. Has Manchester United benefited from that? I don't know. We'll see in the long term. But the idea that Jim Ratcliffe feels like he can make 600 people redundant at Manchester United, working class citizens of Manchester who have given everything that they have at Manchester United for many, many years. I know many people personally that have been, impacted by these redundancies. It never sits well with anyone losing their job, let alone someone who is of a working class environment. It definitely does not sit well with me, and it's very, very unfortunate. But I hate the fact that Jim Ratcliffe feels like that's appropriate, but Manchester United are happy to throw around money. Now, another aspect of Man United throwing around money is this reported body language consultant that they've hired under the time of Erik ten Hag. It wasn't under the time completely of INEOS, but it helped reportedly because Erik ten Hag asked for this body language consultant that helped the players read facial expressions of opponents, especially for penalty shootouts. And what happened? It led to Manchester United winning penalty shootouts in multiple FA Cup knockout games under Erik ten Hag. So they kind of paid the price, 175k for a body language specialist. I don't know how personally, I don't know how effective that is, but this inside Manchester United piece from The Athletic goes into detail essentially of how Manchester United have a very emotionally driven Ruben Amorim. It confirmed the fact that he broke equipment after the Brighton loss in January, and Manchester United had to replace the TV, albeit a very expensive one. I bet you Jim Ratcliffe wasn't happy about that. So on one end, Manchester United have a very emotional, invested manager in Ruben Amorim, and they have an egotistical co-owner, minority owner in Jim Ratcliffe, who, like I said in the introduction, I think he brought Manchester United as a vanity product. I don't think it was an idea to make Manchester United this great dynasty once again. He wants to be successful at a football club, whether it was Manchester United. If Chelsea had accepted his bid, he might have been doing this at Chelsea right now. But Manchester United's financial implications and commercial priorities has been seen under INEOS, and it will probably only continue to happen given the fact that Manchester United financially are not in a good position right now. That is at the expense of the players. It's at the expense of the manager. I can't imagine the manager also being happy about that. But it's also interesting to me that Jim Ratcliffe, is appointing and bringing in different types of consultants to Manchester United to improve them via marginal gains. People he knows, people he has good working relationships with. It's a little bit of nepotism, if I'm being totally honest with you. And Manchester United, I haven't really seen to reap the benefits of that. What does this piece kind of confirm to me? It's confirmed everything I've felt about INEOS and Manchester United under Jim Ratcliffe, but it's making me a bit worried right now. It's making me a bit concerned. It also confirmed that Ruben Amorim at one point was considering walking away from the job. And I'm not surprised, not because I feel like he bit off more than he can chew, but he probably didn't realize the circus that happens on the pitch also happens behind closed doors. I don't know what the future entails for Manchester United, and I'm worried. But going into the summer transfer window, there's already reports about, Cunha agreeing personal terms, Man United looking at signing Brian Mbeumo from Brentford. So we're going to have to look at that. But in terms of looking at how the ownership are running Manchester United, I'm not confident in it. If I'm being honest, I'm not really that confident. Let me know your thoughts down below. Are you surprised by any of it? Are you taken aback? Or is none of it really a shock? I'll be so honest to you guys. I never felt optimistic with Ineos, and Ruben Amorim has the cards stacked against him, not just because of the team that he has, but also with the owners that he has that are heavily involved for potentially what I think is a minority owner. There are some question marks across everything to do with Jim Ratcliffe, Ineos, the Glazers, and the involvement here at Manchester United. But let me know your thoughts down below. Be sure to hit the like button. Be sure to subscribe as well if you're new here.